everybody else to look at the video and say it'll be up on the website, and that normally works very well indeed. But one of the things I'm interested in, Kieran, is how far you're able to liaise with the police, because we were hearing, I think, at a recent Health and Wellbeing Board meeting from our local police, something like 30% of their work is mental health related, and of course, particularly in the evening and perhaps later at night after you close. And I just wondered whether you're liaising with the police, whether they're able to bring people to you who perhaps previously would have ended up in A&E, ED, not a good place for them.
Yeah, so we have a blue light system in place for that. I will agree that the first few months it was quite quiet on the police front. So I don't, again, miss information to spread, but sometimes I think there is a block in that with some services who are quite set in their ways. I mean, if it's a new service and it's brand new, they might not really understand what we do to the fullest capacity. So I definitely think there might have been that hesitant block there. The local police are aware that we exist, which is lovely. We have a whole specific blue light system for them where they can bring someone in where it's not so much go to hospital kind of thing, or, come in to us, do the referral for us, and then that can kind of begin a whole other process of what we do normally, whereas providing emotional support, kind of upkeeping and kind of making that person de-escalated, if that's the correct word to use. We're getting more of that now, which I think is we've had a lot of communication with the King's Lynn police as well. So they're now very, very aware of what we do. We have our manager liaise, I think, at least every week or every bi-weekly support, kind of to let them know upkeep what we're getting and kind of making that person with this de-escalated. Having that very clear communication with police, hospital, Chatterton, it's really integral for our service as well, because we're all then singing from the same hymn sheet. And I think that makes the continuity of the care a lot better for that specific individual in crisis.
Kieran, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thank you.
Not so bad, really.
It was quite scary coming up.
But look, would you, just through you and very personally, would you please thank Charlotte and Paul and James? And I'm sure many of us will want to say something more after we've had an opportunity to see them on the video.
Thank you for allowing me. Thank you for the invite. Anyway, it was lovely.
Thank you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
No, please take your chair.
You can now go and relax. Right, and I'm now going to take us to our next item, which is the quality strategy that we're being invited to approve. And I'm going to hand over to Tricia again to introduce that.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I feel I've got quite a few items today, so I apologise in advance. But I'm not going to make any apologies for bringing for approval today the quality strategy for our ICB and ICS. This is the document that's been pulled together with partners across our whole system, not just from health, but from our local authorities, from our voluntary and faith groups. I'm getting used to that, Emma. And it is very much as we need to do to enhance quality in our system, because quality should be at the heart of everything we do and everything that we support going forward. We've just heard in our Learning from Patients and Staff and Community story today the importance of providing that right quality response at the right time. So quality is not the role of one individual. It's not the role of one organisation, because people, our communities, travel through all of our different services in Norfolk and Waveney. The ICS is different. Therefore, having one strategy in each of the organisations doesn't feel right. I think as part of our governance, we need to ensure that we have prioritised together the areas where we want to see improvement. So for me, this strategy heralds a new way of working, and it's moving away from that historical commissioning and assurance pieces that we've done in the past. And if it is approved by the board today, then our next step with partners, we look at creating an implementation plan which will focus on our ability to measure quality differently for the future.
And it's moving
So
away
our
from
priorities,
that
which are on page 9 of the
and
strategy,
assurance pieces
focus
that
on
we've
us
done in the
leading
past.
through a culture
And
of
if it is approved by
compassion
the board today,
and us
then our next
owning
step
that
with
compassionate
partners
leadership
will look
as
to
board
ensure
members
we have
today.
prioritised
A focus on improving care, quality and outcomes. We've already heard today about the improvements we've seen in NSFT, and that has been as a result of us working in a supportive way to drive those quality improvements. We want to use insights around health inequalities and population health management data to ensure that data is driving our decisions to enhance quality delivery. And most importantly, we want to be able to ensure that all of our services are safe. So if we go to page 10 of the quality strategy, we're looking at having 6 quality pillars. And I'm really pleased to see that one of the pillars that we all agreed on was the importance of having a different offer in Norfolk and Waveney, focusing on quality improvement methodologies and using research and evaluation to drive the changes that we need to make to enhance the population health that we aspire to. We need to know what good looks like, and we can achieve that by listening to our communities and working in a co-production fashion. We need to listen to our staff, patients and communities to make sure that we're getting it right, and if we're not, to work in a fluid way and to move in the direction of quality improvement. We need to work in a supportive way that we've seen has paid dividends with the recent improvements in NSFT, so that we work together to make sure that the resources we have in our system, whether they be fiscal or human or knowledge, actually drive the quality improvements we want to achieve. And finally, on page 21, we focus on our workforce. We know as a board that we have challenges around recruitment and retention in Norfolk and Waveney, and I hope if approved today, the quality strategy will show that we want to work in a different way in Norfolk and Waveney to drive quality improvement, which will act as a magnet for people who have the same core principles and values and want to work in a system where quality is at the forefront of everything that we do, and that we use the rich research, resource that we have with UEA, University of Suffolk, and actually drive improvement through linking everything together. So I'm quite excited about this strategy. Obviously I would be as the SRO, but I'm hoping that we can approve it here today, and then we can move into the much more important phase, which is the implementation phase. Thank you, Patricia.
Patricia, thank you very much indeed. So, is the board members right? Look at this. So we'll take John and then Emma. And just introduce yourself.
Thank you. John Barber, partner member from the Acute. Patricia, I think it's absolutely right that the broad aims of this strategy are as they are. The challenge we've got now, and I agree with what you said about one overarching strategy for the system, otherwise we'll all have our own independent strategies as provider organisations. That's not helpful. But the challenge will be in identifying the very smart outcome metrics that we need are cascaded through all provider organisations and also linked to what place needs to deliver as well. So I think the strategy's right. It's right, it's got that high level intent there, but we have as a system got a lot of work to do to identify the metrics of success. What does it feel like to people in our system? And then for that to be aligned to the plans within the individual providers and also linked to what place needs to deliver as well. So I think
I'm just wondering, would you like to just gather up a couple of comments and questions and then come back?
But we have as a system a lot of work to do to identify the metrics of success.
Emma Ratzer, Chair of the BCSE Assembly. It's an art, really, Tricia, and I think it's going to mess up your pretty colours. But under data and evidence, it would be really nice if you could acknowledge the voluntary sector also has a huge amount of data and evidence to be taken into account. So if we could have our own coloured square which says BCSE, that would be brilliant. Chair of the BCSE Assembly.
James, I think we just spotted you had your hand up.
Yes, please. Thank you. Thank you, Tricia. I hope you can hear me. But I wanted to add my welcome to the strategy from a partner, James Bullion, partner member from local government, and wanted to add my welcome to the strategy. Really pleased that it focuses on both quality and equality as part of its work. And also, I really love the phrase in the strategy that this will be quality based on what matters most to people. In other words, beginning with that person-centred and proportionate approach. From my point of view within the ICB, I recognise what's said in here around the issues about primary care, particularly the sustainability and the quality in primary care, and I really applaud as well the commitment in here to safeguarding and to the Flourish frameworks for children in Norfolk. I think as we implement this sort of live strategy, I'd welcome a focus on the care market as part of the quality issue of people's experience, and also as perhaps a stronger link to the ICS strategy itself, which I think is implied in here but not quite referenced yet. But I really welcome the work and look forward to working and supporting Tricia in its implementation. I think as we implement this.
Great. Well, look, Tricia, do you want to come back on those three very helpful and interesting comments?
Thank you very much, everybody. So on the first one, John talked about the metrics and the measurements. It's not easy because we're going to be working very differently, but to enable those conversations, we will be having workshops where we actually work through what that can look like. And I think that has been very much the approach that we've taken with the development of this strategy. So at a next point, we will be bringing through that implementation plan with those agreed metrics. You will have noted from the front sheet, Emma, that we thought there might be some changes required. So we haven't taken it to that final communication piece yet. So more than happy to include the elements that you suggested there. And finally, James, absolutely, you and I both know the challenges around the care market, and we've committed to each other personally that we want to do something for the future to strengthen the availability of services in Norfolk. Clearly, we need to strengthen the link with the ICS strategy, and I would welcome, before we go to final publication, if I could meet with yourself and Bill and Sue, just to make sure that we're aligned to the two strategic elements that we need to be. But thank you very much for your comments. Clearly, we need to strengthen the link with the ICS
thank you, Frankie Swords, Medical Director of the ICB. I wanted to thank Tricia for the approach that she's taken to pulling this quality strategy together, because this isn't the world according to Tricia. This is absolutely been a co-produced document, and I'm particularly pleased that the Research, Innovation, Evidence and Evaluation team have won her over, and I'm absolutely delighted to see quality improvement and research embedded as one of our 16 together, because that is how we do things here now. We do use evidence, and when we make our decisions, we do evaluate new services and pilots, and if they work, we spread them, and if they don't work, we learn from that and adapt them. And I think that's been one of the real successes of the ICS over the last few months,
And it's really crucial to see that embedded in our strategy for how we want to do things around here, because it's really, really valuable.
We do evaluate new services and
Thank you all very much indeed. And Tricia, thank you especially for your leadership on this. It's really important. So the board is asked to respond to the draft and receive and support the next steps and how we can support the implementation. Everyone, we've done that very satisfactorily. We're not having to endorse anything at this point. Right, sorry, I'm having to switch between different screens here rather inadequately. Where's my agenda gone? Here we are. Right, and that now brings us to approval for our 2 new mental health collaboratives. And this is really important work. We've discussed it previously as a board in private. And I'm delighted to see we've just been joined by Sarah Tuff, Director of Children's Services at Norfolk County Council. Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to hand over to Jocelyn Pike. Jossie, if you would introduce yourself and then take us through the statements.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jocelyn Pike. I'm the Acting Director for Mental Health and Transformation for the ICB. And really pleased to be presenting the paper to you here today, hopefully for approval. And just to summarise, so colleagues will be aware, I hope, that across Norfolk and Waveney for over 4 years now, we have been discussing how we could collaborate in mental health provision. The 2022 Health and Care Act almost gave us that legislative framework which we could wrap around that, which has been fantastic. But in addition, back in 2022, the formation of the collaboratives was accelerated further due to, firstly, our want and our need to support our principal provider of mental health services, our statutory provider, responding to their CQC improvement programme, and also the need to align both our timelines and our ambition with neighbouring systems to ensure that our population didn't observe or experience any inequity of provision. So within the paper, you'll see that initially we are proposing to stand up 2 collaboratives, one for adults and older people and one for children and younger people, with areas of dependency such as sort of 18 to 25, obviously needing to be managed. And there'll be an ongoing conversation about whether convergence is a necessity, a possibility. And similarly, whilst both of the collaboratives are focusing initially on mental health, physical health outcomes and a focus on those wider determinants of health are obviously areas of ongoing discussion and consideration. So just in terms of year 1, I'll sort of go at adults first, if I may. So for 23-24, we've brought together executive leads from Adult Social Care, NCH, Norfolk Community Health and Care, East Coast Community Health Care, Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust, and the ICB, and also representatives from the VCSE sector and primary care. And they've been meeting sort of since January. An agreement has been reached to focus initially on dementia, which includes delirium and depression, and also to facilitate those new ways of working. A partnership agreement is currently being drafted. And that agreement will support the adult collaborative in taking action together, in aligning the resources and having the mandated authority to act, as well as being equally accountable. Within the children and young people space, we have had executive representation from Children's Services within Norfolk County Council, Suffolk County Council, Cambridge Community Services, East Coast Community Healthcare, Norfolk and Suffolk Foundation Trust, the ICB and the VCSE and primary care were also represented. And again, we've been meeting since January. An agreement in that space has been reached to have an initial focus on the redesign of community-based support and for individuals with neurodiversity and with special educational needs and their family. To facilitate the Children and Young People's Collaborative, a common paper has been approved and it's included in your agenda and pack today. When I conclude, I know Sarah would like the opportunity, if possible, just to speak, and obviously Stephen and James are with us today who also might want to come in. In terms of next steps, both the collaboratives, with your approval, will be established formally from next month. And delivery groups are going to sit under those that will develop and implement the areas of redesign. And both are looking at sort of the detail around the sort of the opportunity in the case for change as we speak. I just want to touch on Waveney, if I may. So within the children and young people's arena, the 2004 Children Act does give local authorities, specifically the Director of Children's Services, a lead role in securing cooperation of partners. And so through engagement across Norfolk and Waveney, and also with our partnering system in Suffolk, so Suffolk and North East Essex, the position that's been identified as logical and pragmatic is for NHS funded mental health support for children and young people to be on a county footprint. So what that means essentially is decisions over Waveney will be in the scope of the Suffolk Collaborative. And we're currently working with SNE now to kind of work out how those arrangements will work. And we'll come back to you in due course with more information. And secondly, since October, I do want to talk about engagement, because since October last year, we've had a task and finish group that has been stood up to develop our thinking on the collaboratives and be informed by we've had experts by experience. We've had Healthwatch Norfolk have been in that space, NSFT, Norfolk County Council, VCSE, primary care, but the reach of that group has been wider than that. And I've also had the opportunity to meet with Andy and Healthwatch Suffolk and representatives from the Suffolk system. The first output from that group has been to engage with our public to ascertain if the 2019 children and young people and adult and older people strategies respectively are still relevant. And the survey has now concluded, and we're looking at the initial findings from that to consider sort of what's coming through that we're already doing, what's planned, and what the gaps are. And I'll bring a much more detailed report back to you in due case, so you can really understand some of the really rich data that we got through from that. I'm going to pause, if I may, and I'm going to invite, I know Sarah would like an opportunity to talk about the Children and Young People's Collaborative and obviously colleagues in the adult space.
Sarah, I'm going to hand over to you. And then I think I saw James's hand go up, and then we'll open it up to the board.
Thank you, Patricia. Just for a point of accuracy, I think the paper in front of you says that this report has been submitted to Norfolk County Council's cabinet. That's not correct. It has gone to our corporate board, which is our executive board, and it will go to cabinet in due course, but it hasn't. So just for a point of accuracy, I thought that's worth saying. But actually, what I really wanted to say was I'm really excited that this paper is with you and with others today. The power of this paper is that it has been created collaboratively in itself. It really does feel like now it's an opportunity to build on the strong partnerships that we have across the children's system, and an opportunity to do something different and better to respond to our current context and the lived experience of children and young people, because we know that the risks and threats that they experience in their daily lives, change very quickly, and we have to be responsive to that. The paper makes a reference to a strategic steering group, and the importance of that is to create an authorising environment by which, as senior leaders, we can challenge each other, hold each other to account, seek to maintain momentum, and look at the obstacles and find solutions together. I don't know how everybody else feels about this, but also my colleagues have also asked me to chair that group. So I'll be taking on the chair of that strategic steering group. So I think this is a chance to maximise our collective resources, reduce our duplication, really take advantage of the government reforms that we've got that's really sort of, I think, sits behind this direction of travel. Use data and intelligence absolutely to inform our operational practice, and be less reactive and more proactive. And the very exciting bit about it, I personally feel, is the move towards creating multi-professional operational ways of working that I think goes right back to the 2004 Children Act, which is about bringing services together in an integrated manner to stop children falling through the gaps. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. So whilst the initial focus here is on children's mental health, emotional well-being and neurodiversity, it has a much bigger ambition around all children in terms of their health, education, education and care. So it's all aspects of our work coming together. I think that's probably all I need to say. Patricia,
thank you. Really appreciate that. James.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Jocelyn, for the introduction to the report. And like Sarah, I want to express my support and agreement from a local government perspective. For me, in the adult world, it really will need us to take some care, I think, in reaching alignment of perspective and resources, and to do that, try and do that relatively quickly as an enabler for providers themselves to come together with people who draw on services to co-produce the kind of changes we need in relation to dementia, depression and delirium. I think there's great scope for change, but in order to facilitate that, we'll need to be really clear with each other about what resources and permissions we've got to do that. But I really welcome the possibility of doing it. Also wanted to really welcome as well the involvement of the UEA and Professors Anida Miyoshi and Michael Hornberger, who really have got some excellent expertise that we can really learn from, particularly around dementia and technology and family patterns as well, which I think we need to be, as it were, cutting edge, or as cutting edge as we can with the external perspectives, it seems to me. And then finally, I wanted to acknowledge the role of the Mental Health Programme Board, which Stuart Richardson and I co-chair, which I think can be a key support for this, but is a different place, as it were, than this, if you see what I mean. Thank you very much.
James, thank you. Right, we're now going to turn to the board, so I'll take Hilary, and then I was wondering, Sue, whether you'd also like to come in. But sorry, and Aliona, you just had your hand up. Hilary.
Thanks, Patricia. So I'm Hilary Byrne. I'm a GP and I'm a primary care member of the board. So it sounds really great, and working together is always a good thing to do, obviously, and sharing our thinking is really important. I see a lot of families and have a lot of contact with families who are waiting a long time and are falling through the gaps and worse, and are not getting the services that they need from us at the moment. So I suppose the challenge that I would put is, what's the timescale for this? When are we going to see a difference, and what are the outcomes? Because sharing our thinking is great, but it actually needs to crystallise into something that families can see that is more tangible.
Thank you, Henry. And Josie, what we'll do is, again, just gather up points and then I'll come back to you. Sue, did you want to come in?
I'm happy to come in. I'm Sue Cook. I'm the Executive Director for People Services for Suffolk County Council. I haven't got a question because I've been very much involved in the development. I'd like to offer my support. In terms of the ambition and the vision, Suffolk have been on a similar journey and a similar timescale. So we'll be establishing a collaborative with the same ambition in the same timescale, which is very good news for the population of Waveney, particularly because they straddle both. I really welcome the flexibility of the board around children's services and the appreciation and the understanding of the roles of the directors of children's services in the county councils as the convener and the leader of services for children. And as Sarah says, to have the flexibility to establish on a different arrangement for Suffolk and Norfolk in respect of children's gives us a much greater opportunity to fill the gaps for children, because the children's experience and children's and families' experience doesn't fit into the gaps and the arrangements and the structures that we have put into place across the different prospective organisations. And to be able to come together with the majority of children's services and integrate mental health into that gives, for example, primary care access to a range of flexible provision for families that they otherwise might be unsighted on, not quite understand, not quite appreciate. It gives us a real opportunity to offer an integrated children's offer for children and families linked to the places they know well, like their schools, like their early years settings, like the children's centres, in an integrated way around with other. So we're really supportive of this, both both across all the age range. And for Norfolk and Waveney, for adults, we really welcome the focus, and we'll work with you together with us on the key priorities. I think they're absolutely the right ones.
Thank you very much, Sue. And I do think that issue of Waveney and just simply being in a part of the country where local government boundaries and health and hospital provision boundaries simply don't match. And the flexibility and the pragmatism actually in the way the two systems have worked together and the two councils and the NHS have worked together with wider community partners. It's really, that's exactly what we should be doing. So it's good that. Aliona.
Thank you. Joyce, you made the reference to task and finish groups where service users have been involved. Please can you give us reassurance that they're not finished, hasn't finished, but they are going to be involved throughout the redesign of services. That's one. The other one refers to the UEA involvement. Reading the paper, it looks like we must utilize them, so I'm not reassured that they are already involved in the redesign of services. And the third question I have relates to the second paper circulated for children and young people in relation to the flourishing Norfolk strategy 21-25. We're sort of halfway through that strategy technically. Is there any impact you can share with us, please, from that strategy? And the last one is the reassurance that everything we do, the outcomes are at the heart of what we're planning, please. Positive outcomes.
Thank you. A few points there, Josie. Have a go.
Okay, I'm conscious, obviously, that other colleagues may want to come in. I know certainly the conversation around the impact of Flourish, Sarah may have a view, but I suppose I'll sort of take it in order. When are we going to see a change? This all sounds fantastic. I need a bit more assurance. You know, this year, the core executive and the steering groups for both of them are going to be formally stood up from April, and the first challenge of those steering groups is to receive we're doing a case for change piece, if you like. So what's the opportunity? What are the opportunity and once both groups have been able to digest that, then they can start to work out timelines, granularity. We talked about geography in the children and young people space. We'll do the same in the adult space in terms of what's the role of our places in terms of taking this forward. So I can't sit here today and tell you you're going to see a change in 12 months. I can't do that. What I can do is I can say that the part of the role of the collaboratives is to work out their cadence, their programme over the next, I would say, quarter, and then we would look to bring something back with a little bit more detail. In terms of task and finish groups, so assurance that the task that the service user engagement isn't finished, obviously, of course. But you know, we now need to be very portfolio specific. So the overarching task and finish group that stood up to advise at a PAN level, that has stopped, that its role has ended. What we're now going to do is have a dialogue through both of the collaboratives to say, for example, from a dementia perspective, what does a core service user carer expert by experience group need to look like? What are the key partners that need to be in the room over and above those organisations that are physically signing up to the paper? Similarly, in the children and young people space, the Alliance actually has a really, really good wraparound sort of level of service user and carer engagement. They already do. So again, how do we ensure that they're built into this and that we're not operating in a silo? The UEA involvement, absolutely, again, it's not that we're not talking to them. The fact that we know about them at all is testament to the fact that we are engaged with them. Again, we can come on to that at a later stage. And in terms of a common paper, the impact on Flourish, I think actually probably what we need to do is bring you back some detail on that. I mean, you know, I think it would be I think we would want to do that actually, because Flourish has had a really significant impact. In fact, I would say in the children and young people space, it's been a really big success story. So I think we'd like the opportunity to do that if we could at a later meeting, really. Thank you, Chris.
Right, thank you. I've made the assumption, rightly so, I hope, that the initial engagement and task and finish with the VCSE partners you've mentioned are existing NHS funded providers. So I'm just wondering, moving forward, how is the wider VCSE sector going to be part of the collaboration conversations?
When you say you've made the assumption they're existing NHS partners,
when you talk about VCSE people have been involved, I don't know who they are. So I've made the assumption that, because nothing's come through the assembly, so I've made the assumption that you've gone out to people who are existing, because that would make sense to me, existing providers.
So the process we went through to get a VCSE voice in the room was we went through to Amanda Gabrielson, who oversees the Mental Health Voluntary Sector Providers Forum, and I went out and presented to the Voluntary Sector Providers Forum, and we invited attendance and representation. So Amanda herself was present in the adult space, and then we had an alternate representation in the children and young people space, but again it was through that forum. I say, as we move forward, if I can take dementia specifically, I think again it's a conversation back through that forum to say, are there key partners operating in the dementia space? I mean, there's some obvious ones, but I don't want to name them, but are there key partners who could and should be involved? If there's other ways we should be doing it, Emma, please let me know, because we're not precious.
No, that's fine. I just think that going through the assembly, you'll pick up other people that won't necessarily be around those forum tables. So if we can use the assembly to engage the wider forum, that would be really good.
Perfect.
Thank you. I'll thank you. Really important point that. Sarah, can I come to you, and apologies, because I think I should have brought you in a minute ago on the point about Flourish and children.
No, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. So I just make a comment around the voluntary sector. So in relation to children and young people, just a reminder for the board that we have a strategic alliance. The strategic alliance is the body that exercises our duty to cooperate, which sits in the legislative framework of the 2004 legislation, Children Act. Around that table, we have representatives from all public services and from the voluntary sector. Dan Mobbs is the representative for the voluntary sector on the board, and is actually the vice chair of the alliance, I should say, not the board. And there's an assumption made that all the work that we do through the alliance makes its way back out as representatives of the organisations that they are there speaking for. So, and the alliance has been made aware of the proposal, the paper in front of you, and have put their support behind it. In terms of Flourish, very specifically, I would say that Flourish, because I think most people know that Flourish was created by children and young people themselves. The letters stand for outcomes that matter to children most. So it's not just a word for a strategy. It's a living strategy. So I would say that one of the successes of Flourish is asking each and every one of us what we do within our single agencies around helping children to flourish. And building Flourish into any business planning. We have had a year of making pledges, and we'll be reviewing that year in terms of the pledges that have been made, and then looking to see how we will be measuring the impact of those. And to date, now we have about 150 pledges, and we're not quite a year in, so that's been a real positive process. And then the board itself has a performance framework. So we have a way of looking at what our collective efforts are against those outcomes. So more than happy at a future point in time to bring something back here, if that would be helpful, so that people can get a greater feel for that. And I just wanted to support the comment, really, that I absolutely applaud, obviously, working together. But this is about actually going as far as we can with that, in terms of not just sharing common principles, common language and common ambition, but actually where it makes sense to be working very closely together as integrated common teams so that children don't experience delay, and then we can make good use of resources and make ourselves available to where families naturally go. And now a lot of that will be building around schools, putting schools at the heart of our communities, of which we are now investing quite a lot in as a place-based approach. So just wanted to pick up those points. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And Josie, thank you for all your work on this. I'm very conscious of time, and in fact, our next item on maternity overview does rather directly relate to what we've been talking about in relation to children and young people. So if colleagues don't mind, can I just ask you all, please, in line with the recommendations in the paper, to agree to the establishment of both the Adult Mental Health System Collaborative and a Children and Young People System Collaborative from April of this year, and endorse the direction of travel set out in this paper. Everybody happy with that? Thank you very much indeed. And just for the minutes, we can note the actual timing of the Norfolk County Council Cabinet decision on this. Josie, thank you very much indeed for your leadership and efforts on this, and of course to Zara and many, many, many other colleagues who've been really closely involved in this. And I think in the next stage, when you can really focus on the actions and priorities and outcomes, we'll look forward to the next report. So thank you very much for that. And I do feel we're overworking our Director of Nursing here, but it's possible she feels the same way.
She's been on holiday, she's fine.
In the spirit of compassionate leadership. Tricia, back to you, please, on maternity.
Thank you very much. So this is a really important paper, and as you said, it really leads on beautifully, because best birth gives the best opportunity for children and young people in our society. This is a standing report that comes to our ICB board as one of our statutory responsibilities. I think over the last few months, we've seen a strengthening of the LM&S board, and I'd like to note a very positive response that we've had from all of our acute trusts on a request in the last month to ensure that we have representation from all of our obstetric leads across our 3 trusts, and also a neonatologist. Notice I'm struggling with some of the terms, neonatologist. So we're really looking at the membership of the board and making sure that we've got the right people around the table to have the right discussions. I'm going to take the paper as read, but I'd just like to give some further updates to some of the key areas within the report. So it has become clear over the last few months that we have not got the level of senior midwifery leadership that we need to have within the 3 trusts in Norfolk and Waveney. So I'm working with the directors of nursing to ensure that we review the leadership and come forward with a plan of how we can strengthen the midwifery voices into each of our trust areas. In the report, we talk about the valuable roles and responsibilities of the Maternity Voices Partnerships, and we are awaiting the publication of a single delivery plan for maternity, where we expect to see that it is mandated that the voice of those partnerships needs to be financed. But I'm pleased to be able to say that we've been able to utilise an underspend from 23-24 to give some extra finances to the groups who really represent the voice of service users within our system. We know that in previous papers, we've talked about the digital maturity to support information sharing for pregnant people and pregnant women. And we're working to address that issue through the EPR conversations that we're having within the system. We have raised this as a risk in that the EPR may not go live till 2026, but we're having discussions, productive discussions, about what we can do in the interim to make sure that we can share information safely. And then finally, in section 2.1, we note the section 29A received by the James Paget Hospital from the CQC to note that improvements need to be made in a number of areas, workforce and culture particularly. And I'm pleased to say that James Paget, under the leadership of Joe Sexby, the Chief Executive Officer, established an improvement board to take forward those actions at pace so that we can have that removed as quickly as possible. So those are the main areas. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Tricia. Really clear. Right. Any questions or comments in relation to that report? Yes, sorry, Stephen.
Thanks. Stephen Coleman, I'm partner member for Community and Mental Health. I just wanted to kind of support the report, but in particular, I think in your conclusions where you've described having a single delivery plan for the LMNS, because I think that was the question that I was left reading the paper is, I could see where colleagues were working together on EPR and recruitment. It was slightly less there about culture and how we do that. And I think with maternity, that is a particular set of services, but I know talking to colleagues from East Kent, they would take the view of maternity can't be seen in isolation. You've got to see it in the round. So I think there is a bit about how do we take the learning from that and apply it to a lot of our other services. And as a board, see that coming up in a lot of the other meetings and structures that we have, because I think what you've described is an awful lot of learning. And I would hate to see it just contained to maternity, because actually I think it applies across a whole raft of services that we've got.
Could I, perhaps Tricia, before you come in on that, and let me just check whether there are other. Kathy actually has, sorry. Oh, and Hilary first and then Kathy. Apology, it's actually surprisingly hard to see in here. It may just be my glasses being a bit dusty, but anyway.
Thanks, Patricia. A question really for Patricia was around Entonox. I can see it features in the report, but I wasn't clear what was happening in our local trust. So has there been a reduction in the provision of Entonox for our patients? And if so, are we assured that we've got appropriate pain management strategies in to deal with women who are going through labour? Okay.
Great. And Kathy.
Thanks. I'm really pleased to see that the staffing is going to have more permanent members, because when I was on the quality committee, I was really concerned about the high levels of turnover. But is it going to be like for like on numbers, or are we having a much reduced permanent workforce on the LMNS, on the programme?
So shall I go through those in?
Thanks.
Okay. So firstly, Stephen, this is the joy of the Quality and Safety Committee and the System Quality Group, because we can showcase and take the learning from elements such as this and think about how do we transfer that learning into other areas. So it's not going to be left in silos, absolutely not, because I think it's going to have a great impact on thinking about the work that we need to do around the people plan and the people strategy, and how do we value people within our system, how do we listen to the voices of our staff, and how do we respond to that in a timely way to change the way that we support staff. So I can give you absolute assurance that that won't be lost. With regards to Entonox, there are plans afoot with NHS England, and we are in line with all of the recommendations coming forward at the moment. With regards to Entonox and risk assessments, we are ensuring that all of those risk assessments are being undertaken in a timely way. I'm awaiting a report from one of our trusts at the moment. So once I've got that full report on return from annual leave, I'm quite happy to share that with board members to answer Hilary's question in detail. And finally, with regards to workforce, we have seen over recent months an improvement in the number of maternity support workers and midwives working in all of the units, but we still have significant improvements to make with regards to recruitment and retention. But what I'm pleased to note to the board is that we are now working with a colleague at Region, looking at our workforce planning, thinking about how we can use our experiences of international recruitment to allow more midwives to come into our system, and having conversations with both UEA and the University of Suffolk to see whether the number of places that we have commissioned to develop midwives for the future are sufficient. But more importantly, are they at the right time of the year? Is one intake a year satisfactory? Possibly not. So all of those conversations are happening through the DON, the Director of Nurse meeting that we have as well. So there are active plans to address some of the gaps that we've got at the moment.
Thanks. But specifically on the programme team for the ICB, are they going to be, because they were secondments and fixed term contracts, weren't they? So are they, and they're going to be replaced with permanent staff. So is that kind of an equitable number of people?
So I was really pleased that the ICB EMT were able to support the movement from having an interim LNS team to a substantive LMNS team. Now, some of those individuals were on fixed term contracts. For the others, we will need to go through a competitive process. But the nature of it being a substantive role is more attractive and is more likely to bring in the required calibre of people that we need to drive the changes that we need in Norfolk and Waveney. So it's been seen within the system as being a really positive step forward. And when we've reported that change at Region, we're one of the few areas that have taken that pragmatic approach. So I'm really pleased that we've been able to do that.
Thank you very much. I think, we're happy with that. I think we're not being asked, we don't have to make a decision on it, simply to receive it. Tricia, thank you very much indeed for that. That was really impressive. It was also a very good reminder to me. I think you managed to get 3, if not 4, different sets of abbreviations into one sentence. And I should have said right at the beginning, one of the things we always remind ourselves about is trying to translate NHSEs into English. So the executive management team who lead our system, helping to sort this out. So thank you. At this point, I'm going to turn to Stephen, our finance director. Stephen, just introduce yourself and take us into the financial report, please.
Thank you. I'm Stephen Corse, the Director of Finance for the Integrated Care Board. So the report I've got in the pack today is for month 11, so up to February of this financial year. So firstly, I'll just talk you through the ICB financial position, which is currently a year-to-date break-even position. We're having to consolidate both the CCG and then ICB positions given the change during the financial year. We've got a number of risks which we had in the plan, which we're offsetting with some mitigations to reach that break-even position, which is in line with our plan. We included 5.4 million of unmitigated risks within that plan, particularly around continuing healthcare cost inflation and under recovery of elective recovery fund income. And those have crystallised into the position which we've managed to mitigate to maintain a break-even position. Within the pack, we look through the risks that we are carrying into the financial year, and remaining between now and the year end, we have around 1.3 million risk that we are trying to mitigate. That's come down from 1.4 million that we're reporting at the end of month 8. Within the risk register, there are 3 risks which have reduced from those reported at month 10 around the efficiency programme, which were risks reference 1.8, and also reducing the risk on continuing healthcare and personal health budget case referrals, which was risk 12. But only one of the 3 risk reductions have reduced from red to amber, so still some risk within the position. I won't spend too much time going through section 3 of the report, which is the statement of financial position. The main movement from year end is a change in accounting standards around IFRS 16, which means we have to, where we have the right of use of a lease asset, we have to now capitalise that asset onto our balance sheet. And that's predominantly premises we have with Norfolk County Council and premises we have in Kings Lynn, which now appear on our balance sheet.
Moving on to the ICS position, so all of the NHS organisations that sit within the Norfolk and Waveney system, the month 11 year-to-date position is an adverse variance of 17.8 million and 19.6 million actual deficit position, and we're forecasting a year-end position of a 20 million deficit, mainly through operational pressures within the acute sector, elective recovery fund work not being achieved, and also the implementation and recognition of efficiency programs, and also staffing and additional capacity issues as we work through a very tricky winter. Some of this is offset by Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital with a forecast year-end surplus position alongside some of the break-even positions that we've got within the system as well. Just touching briefly on the capital position, which is in the report at section 5. We're currently showing an overspend of 8.8 million, but working through that with NHS England colleagues, we haven't had recognised some of the additional capital funding that we've agreed within year. So when that hits the position by year end, we're confident that we should hit a break-even position on our capital. So I'll pause there and happy to take any questions around the financial position.
Thank you very much, Steve. Questions, comments to Steve? Yes, David.
Thank you, Patricia. I think the thing that catches my eye, Stephen, is the variances on the ICB. And I suppose I'm interested in what your view is on our year-end run rate, because a number of the offsetting variances are almost look like one-offs and large one-offs, like the 24.8 million, and yet we have some recurring negative variances like continuing healthcare and things like that. So I'm just wondering if you can say a little bit about where that puts us as we enter the new financial year in terms of the risk we're carrying.
Yeah, so as you can see from the report, we've used a large amount of non-recurrent benefit to improve the position to break even for the current financial year. Clearly, as we move into the next financial year, and we're going through planning at the moment, that does give us a risk that will increase the stretch we have around our efficiency program in order that we can kind of keep a sustained position. So quite right to highlight that. It does give us some risk going into next year, which we're looking to mitigate.
Thank you very much indeed for your leadership on this, and also for the way you've been bringing or building on the community of finance directors all around the system. I think that's really critical. I know Hein's been doing the same thing with the chairs of committees, and it's a really important way of everybody understanding the risks, understanding the need to work together to make sure that we just get the best possible results we can for the resources available. Even more important now than probably at any other time. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Karen Barker, Director of Corporate Affairs and ICS Development. I'm here to go through the governance handbook and hopefully get the board to approve the changes that we proposed. So just for the uninitiated, the governance handbook is the set of rules that we follow within the ICB, and it sets out how the organisation runs. We first approved the governance handbook on the 1st of July, so we're now 9 months in, and we've done a little bit of a review of the workings within the ICB, just to see what tweaks we need to the governance handbook. In particular, many of the committees have gone through their terms of reference. The committees support the board, and there are changes to some of the committees' workings in terms of reference included in the changes today for the governance handbook. It's not the final review we will do of the governance handbook. We are going to look at doing a more large-scale review later in the year, but the changes that we kind of need now to keep us working in the most effective way are here for you to consider. If there's any particular queries on any of the committee terms of reference, we do also have the chairs of the various committees in the room, so they'll also be able to help with those. So I'd be really grateful for the approval today of the governance handbook. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. Questions, comments? Yes, Aliona.
Thank you. Just a little observation. I read a few times at different committees, but the graphing on page 2, the lovely country of Norfolk and Waveney, and all the parties within the system, we are missing the independent providers. They do not fall within any of those categories, but we have a number of independent providers who deliver NHS services locally. So we just need to acknowledge them, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Karen. Obviously, a huge amount of work has gone into this. Will the larger review later in the year enable us to take an opportunity to think about how the collaboratives feed into the integrated care system and that governance route? Because I think this is an issue we've been going around for some time, and we really need to crystallise how we're going to do that formally.
Have any other questions? But Emma?
Thank you. Just a request from me again, please. On page 65, there is a point 5, which is about working with Healthwatch and the VCSE. And the second bullet point starts, we will continue to build relationships with the VCSE Assembly, which to me sounds like the VCSE Assembly is not part of the ICS. So could we just say we continue to invest in the VCSE Assembly rather than build relationships with? It just makes me feel like we're separate. Thank you.
Bill, my apologies. It's not always easy.
That's all right.
To
Thank you, Patricia. I just wanted to say for the board to note that we've beefed up the primary care representation on the ICP with bringing in the chairs of the place boards, which I think will make really strengthen the work and focus of the ICP. Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you, Bill, very much. And I thought that connection and involvement of the place boards on the integrated care partnership really, it really made a difference at our most recent meeting. So thank you for that. Any other comments on the governance handbook? I don't think so, Karen.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. So the independent providers, we can absolutely rectify that. I think on the collaboratives, obviously I'm working very closely with the directors of strategy and the acutes, and who are very tightly linked to those acute collaboratives. And there are obviously other collaboratives that we've heard about as well today. So we will be working to update the governance handbook in the relevant way with regard to all of those, as all that work kind of comes through the system. Yeah, with regard to the VCSE, I'll feed that back into the communications team there. And definitely, you are a very firm part of the system, so that's great. Thank you for your comments.
So, subject to those changes, is the board happy to approve the new governance handbook? Thank you very much. And can we now, Karen, back to you for the board assurance framework?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the usual review of the board assurance framework. Again, this month, the executive management team has reviewed thoroughly all of the risks, and we've gone through with a view to presenting these to you today as the current risks that are on the board assurance framework. We have summarised updates so that hopefully you can see quickly where things have changed since your last review at board. And again, we have director leads for each of the risks that are here today. Happy to take questions. So it's open for comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Still, yes, hi.
Hein van Wildenburg, non-executive member, Integrated Care Board. Quite a few of the risks have a target delivery date magically of a few days' time. And most risks will continue on. So I think it would be good also for the risk owners to say, when do we think we're going to be at our tolerated risk level? So that's my request, really.
Yes, Stephen.
Thanks. A couple of points that kind of builds on that. I think when you read it, particularly where we've got risks that, given the target date, look like they're either not going to be achieved, or so I think it's just that RAG rating around that, because actually looking at some, there's a danger that we're going to miss it. I think we just need to be really honest about that, and it's managing it in that way. And the other bit, and I bring this from the board of NCH&C, is we had a lot of interest in this board assurance framework. So something to think about is how this is then linked and translated into individual board ones as well, because particularly when you're talking about risk appetite, it's really important to see what the ICS is carrying as a risk, as opposed to an organisation. And that's said in the spirit of not wanting to be a sovereign little island. It's seen as actually we get the big picture now. Can we adjust our risk rating? Because when we see that one, that's a much bigger risk, or that isn't, or whatever. So just something to think about. Maybe we could pick that up offline, but then it should strengthen this as well, and we can feed in.
Thank you, Steve. Really important point. David.
Yeah, thanks, Patricia. Can I just make one, because I think it pulls together some of this here, that I think the ones that we as a board might be most concerned about are the ones which have catastrophic consequences. And I'm wondering whether we're due to meet again, Karen and I, to talk about how this is managed going forward. I'm wondering whether we don't give some thought as to how the board is briefed on those catastrophic consequence risks where we may be operating above a tolerance level that might be acceptable to the board, and how we actually make sure the board are aware of that, and the board are aware of the potential actions that could be taken, but the implications of taking those actions if we took them. And I'm just wondering whether that's something that you give Karen and I a task to do, to come back and think about how we deal with that, how we surface those to the board, because they're the ones that would worry me most, I suppose. It's the catastrophic consequence ones.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, so just to take all those different topics. So yeah, on the tolerated risk, what we do is we tend to work on a kind of yearly basis. So you will see a lot of the end dates are the end of March, and we try and work out what that risk is. So effectively, what's the risk of not achieving it by the end of the year? So you will now see them all kind of change and be brought forward for the following year. So that's just the point in time. With Stephen's point about the wider system, David brought together his fellow audit chairs a few months ago. So we have started a piece of work with the various directors of corporate affairs across the trusts to basically look and review their risk registers and work out as a system how we can kind of bring that together. So we've just started that work. It is quite a challenge because we all run different kinds of risk management, but we're working on that. And nationally, I'm linked in with my peers nationally who are all grappling with this. So you will see some movement on that. And then, yeah, on the catastrophic risk, I'm really happy to work with you, David, on that if that's something the board would like us to do. Thank you.
Good. Bill, you've got your hand up. Sorry, I didn't spot you immediately.
That's fine. I just wanted to pick up the issue on the dates for the risk register. The date. I mean, they don't have to finish at the end of the financial year, and I think it's very helpful if we think that it's going to take us 2.5 years to mitigate a risk, and look at our appetite for living with risk, or even if we don't see an end date in the risk being mitigated. But actually, if they're all ending on the same day, it doesn't really give us an idea of overall progress to that goal. And if they all then get renewed to the end of the following year, so you know, is it possible for us to look at having some realistic dates for mitigation, or at least till they hit the level of our appetite for risk?
Yeah, ultimately, there's no kind of rules around what date you put. You can put at whichever date you wish. A lot of these things, sadly, never get quite down to the levels we're hoping for. So it's very hard to kind of pin down when that would happen. But you are right. Some of them, yes, we can do because we're hoping that they will be mitigated down to the right level. Yeah, we can have another review of that and bear that in mind. Some of them more logically sit at the end of the year. The finance risk, for example, it renews every year. But I'm sure we can go through that bill in more detail, executive management team.
Good. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody, for that. We don't need to approve that at this point, do we? No, we've just noted it. Wonderful. Thank you. So we now come fairly rapidly as ever to the reports from committees. Aliona, would you like just to quick overview of quality and safety and anything you particularly want to highlight.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you. We had a couple of meetings since the last board meeting, very constructive, very full-on meetings. Items I would like to bring to everyone's attention. One of the topics we looked at is the ambulance response time. Not surprising, it links to above 20 risks we just discussed. We looked into serious incidents relating to delayed ambulance conveyance, handover to acute care, or transfer between facilities. Whilst the report highlighted some of the actions which are put in place, it also identified that delays continue and they are occurring due to a number of factors, including the patient's flow and discharge challenges and so on. So the list goes on. However, we're reassured that actions are still in place, so work in progress. And of course, at the next meeting, we're going to look for an update on this matter. The other one is neurodevelopmental disorder provision. Again, the report we had highlighted the inequalities currently experienced across Norfolk and Waveney and the impact it has on our patients and their experience and the escalation in their health conditions, so on. However, we've also been informed that the procurement for additional services has now been completed, and reassured that hopefully within the next 3 to 6 months, about 500 young people who are on the waiting list hopefully will come down from that waiting list. So again, work in progress, but there is a progress. So we're looking for an update in the next few months. I will take the liberty to just very quickly, briefly mention about the Patients and Communities Committee. We had our second meeting yesterday. Again, a full-on meeting. Just to highlight a couple of things was the report we had regarding the work carried out in relation to health inequalities across Norfolk and Waveney. Lots of good work, and we're looking forward to see where that takes us. And the second one, just linking back to our mental health discussion earlier on, we had participation from 2 people with lived experience who were party to the Rethink Mental Health, correct, project, and they were sharing how they found their involvement and so on. So there is definitely good work in place. We just need to build on that and hopefully replicate that across other services. We do other redesigns and so on in the system. So I would like just to thank everyone and those 2 committees for all their hard work. Lots is going on, and we can have double the time in the meetings to discuss everything, but very positive, and thank you to respective officers for that.
Thank you very much, Aliona. I think unless anyone has an absolutely burning issue at this point, it's really just a quick highlight from each of our chairs. Hein, finance, please.
Thanks. I'll take the report as read, but a few items to lift out. The forecast outturn for the system, a 20 million deficit. Stephen talked about it earlier. For the ICB in itself, it's at balance, but to the point David raised earlier, there's a lot of one-off help within that. That's why BEF risk 11A is quite red, so there's an underlying deficit. We also spent quite a bit of time on the emerging financial plan for the next financial year, starting in a few days. At the last meeting, that was still works in progress, so still quite a bit of a deficit to try and reduce. I'll leave it at that. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Hein. I think at this point, nope, just thank you very much for that report. James and the Primary Care Commissioning Committee.
Thank you, Patricia. I mean, just the only points I think to highlight is the continued work around the transition of new services into the responsibility of the committee, and the work that Mark Burgess and his team have been doing to familiarise ourselves with that and to risk assess and look at the skills capability within the system overall to do that. Other than, and we've gone on some pretty good training actually on those issues as a committee actually, which has been really excellent. But other than that particular issue of transition, our main concern remains the resilience and the sustainability of primary care. And I think within the committee, some further thoughts emerging around taking some time to reflect on that in a little bit more discursive way between meetings. So I think that's in the offing and in the planning. And of course, we have the discussion of the public consultation as well around services in Norwich. Thank you.
Good. James, thank you very much indeed. Hilary, the Performance Committee.
Thanks, Patricia. So, yeah, the Performance Committee has been meeting, and we've now managed to get our meetings at the right time to give you a written paper. So, hopefully everybody's had a chance to have a look at that. So, key items really are we've agreed the forward work plan. We're looking at the data and having a single version of the truth around the data, which is obviously really important across the system. Reviewing performance against soft 4 metrics. And areas for concern, really, just to mention, are things that people will already be aware of to an extent: 78-week waits and the pressure on that, urgent and emergency care pressures, which are obviously ongoing, 12-hour mental health breaches, and also patients being held waiting to get into beds in the community are a concern, and ambulance handover times. Please take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Hilary. Right, David, your 2 committees, please.
Thank you. First audit, we did a deep dive on the in-house in pharmacy and other services, which obviously then came to the Part 2 board meeting earlier this month. So you're aware of what we did there. I think the only thing I then want to raise on conflicts of interest, and Karen may have an update, is around the mandatory training position, which we were very concerned about that having been withdrawn some months ago, but I don't know whether we now have an alternative, because there is a requirement, obviously, for us to go through mandatory training for conflicts of interest, but there's no longer a national programme available to us. We had quite a long discussion around that and the way out of that.
Yes, so essentially the national NHS team pulled the mandatory training on conflicts of interest, and we didn't really have any warning. They have now confirmed that they would reinstate some training and do some training, and we're waiting for that programme to come through to us on our teams and our systems. So I don't have any update about the date for that yet, but we can continue to chase.
I think our main concern was, as you get towards the year end, you have to make certain statements and give certain assurances, and obviously we're now very close to year end.
Thank you very much, David. Now, so that brings us to almost to the end of our agenda. We didn't have any questions in writing from members of the public, because when we get those, of course, we take them where they relate to an agenda item, we take them during the agenda item. But I'm conscious we've got several people with us, both in person here and online. So if anybody would like to ask a question at this point, particularly if it does relate to an item on the agenda, we'll do our best to answer it now, but otherwise we'll answer in due course and put the answer on the website. But just in case anybody here wants to, Chris, presumably you're monitoring anyone. Okay. All right. Well, sorry, pressing buttons furiously here on these different bits of technology. That does bring us, there being no questions from other people, to any other business, if there is any. Feels as if we've had a pretty full agenda already. Thank you all very much indeed. What I suggest is that we take a 10-minute break, and we will then resume in here for a private meeting. But a 10-minute break, so we'll come back at 5 to 4. Thank you all very much indeed.